Hello and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews. It's Gaming Friday. I'm Gary.
And I'm Geoff.
And today we are taking a look at Bioshock, which came out back in 2007 by a whole host of developers, actually.
Yeah.
2K Games, Irrational Games. Of course, Irrational Games were eventually sold to 2K Games. This was also worked on by Feral Interactive, Digital Extremes, 2K Australia, and 2K China. So
Right.
this game was made over, I think, like 5 or 6 years across multiple different continents.
It's interesting. What? And they just patched it together from all those studios.
I think all those studios worked on different aspects of it, and I mean, Irrational Games was a fairly small studio anyway. I think it was like 100 odd employees. Anyway, it was Ken Levine who was, the soul of Irrational Games. He went there and created it after he left one of his earlier video game companies.
Yeah.
Of course, Ken Levine is pretty much one of those names in the game world. He was heralded and won awards for his writing and for the worlds that he created with his writing. Some of his most notable works includes Thief, The Dark Project,
Right.
Freedom Force, and a couple of its sequels, and of course Bioshock. But Bioshock is pretty much considered the the unofficial sequel to System Shock. It sort of inherited a lot of what Ken Levine put into System Shock, or System Shock 2, into Bioshock.
Yeah.
Of course, it even shares the second last name.
Yeah.
This game was originally only released on PC and Xbox 360.
Yeah.
It took a year and I think 6 months. So it came out in 2008 on the PS3. And I have to say that there was a demo for this game. I'm not a big fan of demos for games, but when the demo for this game came out, I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And it was a demo that I played through several times and got other people to come and say, hey, watch this video, play this demo. How gorgeous does this game look?
Yeah.
It's a traditional first-person shooter.
Yeah.
But it borrows heavily from, the survival horror sort of aspect.
Yeah, we're playing this on 360 right now.
We are, yeah.
I mean, obviously, it looks dated compared to modern day graphics, but for 360, they've done quite well at capturing an atmosphere here, haven't they?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you kind of limited range, vision anyway. It's not exactly many objects it's kind of rendering right now. But I can honestly say that when you go into the city of Rapture, it's not so much the graphical fidelity that you're looking at. It's all the intricate detail and all of the designs and patterns in the world that has been created, which is in itself telling a story.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so maybe, the polygons and pixels are not, billions, but
No.
what it's doing is very atmospherically telling you a story with its world design, which I think is amazing in this game.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very steampunky kind of design philosophy, isn't it? And
Well, it's set in the 1960s with future tech,
yeah,
of course.
that's it. Yeah. So you've got this kind of clunky mechanical base upon which technologies which are really not even in our grasp now are presented as being possible.
Yes.
But only obviously
For
in
science.
For science, only in this mythical land of the Rapture, which is a dystopia or utopia, depending on your perspective, of the creation of who? What was his name again?
Andrew Ryan, who was
Ryan,
pretty much now going to give you an audio sort of introduction into the world of Rapture, which is breathtaking. The moment you see this underwater city, you're just like, wow. And you get to go and explore quite a fair chunk of this underwater city.
Yeah.
And whilst you do so, you kind of discover and learn the history and some of the inhabitants of this city and what happened to them. So the game is very much so based on the ideas of objectivism. And
when you say the game, do you mean this place where we're going to? This
well, very much so.
horrible area?
The ideas behind the whole game and the world of Rapture,
Yeah.
is based on the ideas of objectivism, which some people have sort of characterized as being a closed system, which is not subject to change at all. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, Rapture is a secluded city which is completely isolated, so nobody's ever due to visit. So I can only imagine that the lighthouses above are only there for Andrew Ryan and maybe his cronies to ever leave or come back again.
Yeah, it seems that these people wanted to take themselves into a land where they live by their rules.
As he explains, he's tired of all of the other ideologies of the world and decided maybe he wants to just take all of the best of everything and put it in one place, which is a really, kind of cool idea. Mm-hmm. And, if you've got the money and the mad science to pull it off...
It reminds you of the ideas of eugenics, which were popular through the sort of 20s, 30s.
Of course, yep. Well, I mean, I'm carrying on with the philosophy of objectivism. One of the originator of it, I think she's called Ayn Rand. I'm terrible at pronouncing names at the moment.
Yeah.
But she actually said that her philosophy, in essence, is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his own happiness as the moral compass of his life.
Yeah.
With productive achievement as his noblest activity, and his reason as his own absolute.
Yeah, so, I mean, really, that's just fancy speak for men are gods, which is a very old occult philosophy stemming thousands of years. But yeah, this is just her idea of basically saying, oh yeah, men rule and they create their environment as though gods, and their ideas are the only ones that matter. So it's a very typical occult philosophy manifest, really.
Well, this game has many layers of multiple different philosophies and ideas, which is what's made this game such a rich palette for people writing essays and in-depth analysis of all of the character types that are presented to you in this game.
Yeah.
Which for me is when another case in point of art in the video game form proving itself beyond its medium, proving to those that would say perhaps not play video games or not see this as something as a truly artistic merit that is presented in this game, which is, I'm saying now, fantastic for that. You can also see the influences of perhaps George Orwell in this game, with the opposition to totalitarian states, social injustices, and sort of the other things that George Orwell loves to go into in his works.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of, there's a lot of things going on many different levels here. This is one of those games where you don't really have to pay anything very much attention.
You can
in depth,
skip right through all of that philosophical bullshit. Absolutely.
You can just be like, oh, look at these fucking crazies, and just go around smashing in some heads.
Yes.
Or you can get, it allows you to get into the depth of it as much as you want, and really kind of like explore the lore. A lot of people rate this, especially this first one, don't they, out of the Bioshocks, as being one of the best ones.
I'm just going to say it now, Geoff. I have played and completed this Bioshock game about 6 times.
Yeah.
I can say that there are 3 endings.
Mm-hmm.
None of them, Mass Effect 3 problem here, where the 3 endings are very, very similar to each other.
Yeah.
I'll go into that a little bit later.
Yeah, well, a lot of people rate this quite highly. This being the first one. Is that was where I was going? Yeah. This is one of the greatest games ever made. Without a doubt, I've played through this game so many times that even coming back to it now with its not so glorious graphics as we have today is just one of the best games ever made. Period. And as I've said, it kind of surpassed just being a video game into being an actual intelligent, sophisticated, story-driven game with elements of other video games in there as well. Yeah. Well, to me, when I first played Bioshock, I first picked this up when it came out on 360, maybe a little after it came out, but I can smash the debris. Yeah, but I mean, for me, this was like kind of like an old storytelling trope, just kind of rehashed in a different form, you know, with its own sort of steampunk style, which was quite cool.
Yeah.
Oh, and as you can see straight away.
But I guess
it's
there's something that also very attractive about the fact that you are completely submerged underwater as well, and that there is the leaking, the fact that the city is slowly flooding.
Yeah.
For all these leaky pipes, and the whole world is just fantastic just to look around and explore.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's got a very unique art style to it, which does carry it. And then there's this kind of, because you're also sort of stuck in this blue world in which, like, it can get very dark. It's got quite good lighting effects and things like that. And you've got this kind of like, it's a bit like Fallout, where you've got the juxtaposition of the horror that's around you with these happy-go-smiley propaganda adverts all over the place.
And you also get the adverts for the plasmids and these very, very upbeat sort of vending machines.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Have fun whilst you kill people. This is a great invention. That kind of type thing. It's like really kind of opposing or oxymoron, and almost like you're constantly presented with this cognitive dissonance of an oxymoronic world.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like, I mean, that is one of its charms, Bioshock. There's no doubt about it. It's basically as fucked up as you can think.
Well,
and that's presenting that world to you.
Yes.
One thing I kind of didn't really like about it was the sheer blandness of your character.
Okay, I was just about to say, I mean, can you even remember the character's name?
See, no, not really. And
Jack.
It's generic.
Shit is what it means.
Generic character. Even in the second one, your interaction as a character with the narrative of the story and the twists in the story.
It's a case of...
Again, it was like, this thing was meant to be happening to you. You're a big part of the narrative, but
But you're silent.
Didn't care about it, yeah. And I was not... I mean, the most... you got to do things, like, to really have any kind of choice and to allow any kind of personalities come through was... There's these little sort of side quests. You occasionally get a little option to be able to do something that's where you've got a little moment of freedom.
Well,
and like you can do things which you might think, oh, I wonder if they expected you to do that. But then you'll find out, bing, an achievement pops up, and you're like, oh yeah, they did expect me to do that. So it's kind of like
there are multiple choices in the game, whether you will, and again, they're sort of tied into the ending. I mean, they're sort of... I wouldn't say that the game has many side quests. There's pretty much just the main story, which does involve you meeting different survivors. Some of them are partially sane, but only partially.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone has gone insane. And for the early part of the game's narrative, you are being led along by this radio voice of a man calling himself Atlas, this sort of Irish voice who's looking to try and get his family out of Rapture, and sort of hires you and aiding you to aid him to escape together. And of course, if you've already played the game, you know that there are a lot of twists and turns in the story, despite the fact that your character is a mute. And it does come down to the few yes-no decisions that you have to make.
Yeah.
And it does very much play into the game story as well, where, you're kindly asked to go and do things, and there is no other way to progress the story until you kindly do so.
Yeah. Well, that is... Yeah, this is it. I mean, in actual fact, like, a lot of the narrative for me, although... If you'd not really played many games like this before and you'd not seen these kinds of trends, I mean, I would imagine if this is all new to you, then you would think, oh man, this story's amazing, it's edgy. It does things that are
Well, for me, it's the way
you
it
know-
manages to keep telling the story without slowing down the game.
well. To me, that is a plus and a negative. But I mean, the way they kind of bring in these elements of transhumanism, philosophies of, like you say, kind of like state-crafted utopias and their effectiveness and their capacity to make them work, all that sort of thing. Like there's an element of storytelling depth to it that
Yeah.
perhaps you may not come across in many stories these days. However, I have to say, to me, it's just kind of using a lot of cliches in many respects and just wrap them up in a slightly different package. And so then when you actually boil that down to its base elements, what do you have? You have a first-person shooter, which, for me, yes, all right, you see these Vita chambers here.
Yeah.
These, you
It's
basically
very much
die.
a video game form, yeah.
Yeah, the stuff about this game that really fucking annoys me, which is the fact that when you die, there's no penalty. You just appear here. So
Well,
if-
in
say-
the other
say you've got a
Bioshock games,
boss-
you basically have to pay some. You lose some of your money, which you use to buy health and ammo and upgrades.
Yeah, but there's always an abundance of it. And say you've got a boss stood right here, right? And you're like, oh, this boss is really tough, and he can fucking kill you in one hit. You go up to him, whack whack, he'll kill you, and then you'll appear in this fucking chamber right here. So you can walk out, whack him again a couple of times, he'll kill you again, and then you'll wake up here, and you can keep just chipping him down like that, bit by bit by bit. And every time you die,
Well,
there is absolutely zero consequence to it.
I am very glad that you've brought up the Vita chambers because, as I said, I've played this game through multiple times, and I can tell you that there is an achievement. I think it's worth like 100 or 200 points. You know, back in 2007, those are huge achievement achievements.
Yeah.
And there is one called, I think it's called Big Brass Balls,
Yeah.
and that is to turn off those Vita chambers so that you do not have the option of resurrection at all,
Right.
from start to finish. And I've done it, and that is on the maximum difficulty of the game. Is a truly nightmarish experience because you have to worry about your ammo, conservation, your items. You need to go and loot. You need to go and smoke some cigarettes to restore your mana, then go and drink some booze to restore your health, and try and
Yeah.
balance out all of the stuff that's around you, which is a lot more limited. So yes, and I've got to say that this game is great for anybody who's never played a first-person shooter before, because I gave this game to someone, and she had never played a video game, and I said Bioshock is a great start. She finished that game. It is accessible to new players to the genre, which, as again I've said, this game, you know, it kind of opened the doors for more people to actually get involved in something that's quite intelligent within the video game market.
I do very much agree with that, actually. I mean, as a, because obviously this is a build on, like, I mean, for instance, System Shock,
Yes.
that's just getting a reboot right now.
Yes, so it's still looking at System Shock 3, you know, it's still in Kickstarter, there's still so much.
And that's it. I mean, all these sort of old RPG / stories.
It's one of my favourite horror moments right there, those dark shadows.
Yeah, she's wearing the stupid fucking bunny ears, and yeah, I mean, a lot of these kind of horror tropes have been main staple of sci-fi for a long time for me. So if you had already been familiar with these, then, like I say, this isn't going to hold anything new for you. But if you do actually, if, like you say, if you are new to it, this is a fantastic entry point. And it's all nice, shiny new graphics, so it's tolerable for people who have, not coming from an ancient time.
Yeah.
So you kind of need these things to be rehashed for younger people and for people who've not been into the genre before, so that they can get access to it. And it is a particularly, like you say, it's got a lot of elements coming together, like horror, as well as action and narrative telling in many respects.
Absolutely, and it's tied up in what is, for me, a silky smooth gameplay. Literally, you have your gun in one hand, your plasmid in the other, and depending on, your sort of preference as to whether you want to set your enemies on fire, whether you want to electrocute them, whether you want to mass electrocute people if they're all standing in a puddly water area, whether you want to send insect swarms to sting and immobilize your enemies.
I mean, that looks like Fallout Guy, doesn't it?
Ever so slightly.
Yeah, the mechanics were all right. They were all right. I mean, they were a little bit, again, a little bit cliched, the things you can have. Like,
it's kind of like,
like you've got magic,
lightning,
Yeah, you got magic. All right, it's transhumanism, but it is magic. You got ghosts here as well. Look at this shit.
Yeah, well, this place is deeply troubled.
Yeah, but, there's still your standard format. Fire, lightning, ice.
You get your very basic fundamental weapons from, the wrench from Half-Life to the pistol to the shotgun to the machine gun.
I mean,
to
this
rocket launcher
wrench is iconic for Half-Life.
Absolutely, it's
the
the most standard default melee weapon.
These kinds of first-person shooters, pretty much all have to have the crowbar or the wrench now, don't they?
Absolutely, it's just a staple. Yeah. And so for me, the controls are very simple: plasmid in one hand, weapon in the other.
Yeah.
The interface very simple. The quick wheel of I want this plasmid, this weapon, quickly changed and done. The fact that the main screen is limited to just a small amount of information, how much health you've got and how much mana you've essentially got.
Yeah.
And for the bulk of the game, you do mix up your plasmids and your weapons, and there are stealth sections in the game which do require you to sneak around or to use your environment to your advantage, because you will be able to hack the Rapture's security systems, whether it's turrets or whether it's flying drones. You'll be able to hack them, and then they will work for you, and you can use them against your enemies.
Yeah. And then there's these guys as well.
Now we meet our first little sister in the game, and these are all over the city, and they are monsters in their own right. I mean, they're going around collecting Adam from dead splicers, which have been butchered and killed by, wait for it, the Big Daddy, who's just about to make his appearance here. I was going to say now, if you played the demo of the game, or if you just leave the game on its main menu running, you get to see a beautiful cutscene about a splicer wandering around Rapture before he engages in a fight with a Big Daddy. It's pretty close to this outcome.
Yeah.
Except the Big Daddy in that cutscene uses his drill a lot more. So, Big Daddies are in the world, and they're like freight trains of armored death, and they are painful enemies, and you do not want to anger them unless you have decided thuggish Splicer's face unless you decide you are going to harvest the little sisters yourself. Now, I have not really gone into Adam yet, and
they give you a very basic binary moral choice when you're playing.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, they heralded it as sort of the staple of the game, which for me is a big part of it, but not too integral. It's integral to the game's endings, which I'll say now is you either have the option of rescuing every little sister, which means you've harvested none of them.
Yeah.
There is another ending, which means you've harvested one or nearly all of the little sisters. And then there's another ending where you've harvested every single one of them.
Right.
And so that's so you've got the super good, the medium bad, and super bad.
Now
And the idea of the reason why Rapture has fallen apart is because of their addiction to this genetic material called Adam, which has given them all superhuman superpowers.
Yeah.
Which obviously you play around with these plasmids, and thankfully you don't become as deranged as these splicers, which have become addicted to it to the point where they're killing each other for it. And these little sisters are harvesting the Adam. The Big Daddies are protecting them. You have the choice. You need the Adam in order to power yourself up to get through some of the more difficult challenges later in the game. And if you don't harvest these little sisters, you're only going to get a small amount of the Adam, making things more difficult for you. Hence the moral conundrum. So, simply playing, if you're playing the game on easy mode, don't harvest any of the little sisters. When you're playing on balls to the wall mode, harvest all the little bitches and be ready to fight every single Big Daddy that comes your way. And there are pros to doing it. You can set traps for the Big Daddies, and you just kind of have to look away if you're like me when you're harvesting these little girls. Kind of look away as you drain the life force out of them. It's quite horrible to watch. The game kind of punishes you as you harvest these girls, make you feel like an absolute bastard when you're doing it.
They're not really human, though, are they? I mean,
well,
that's
they
kind
were
of the way
in
they
a way.
justify it.
They're kind of spliced
in some ways.
to be that way.
Yeah.
And it just adds to the, the massive horror of this world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of the things. I mean, they're called splicers, but this is basically people who take the technology and they merge themselves with it.
Yes.
And the general theme of this, why Rapture turns to shit, is because merging the machine with humans who are so vain that they will do anything to improve themselves.
Yes.
Turns out that just as much turns you into a fucking psycho nutcase as improves you. So that's kind of the twist, These guys are like, I'm so beautiful, and they're actually like horror fucking freak shows.
It very much reminds me. I mean, one of the reasons why we're talking about Bioshock today is that E3 has just recently passed, and one of the most interesting games shown there was We Happy Few. Which, when I looked at it, I was like, this just looks like a Bioshock a game in terms of its graphics, gameplay, storytelling, environment. And I was surprised to find out that it's actually nothing to do with Irrational Games or 2K Games or Ken Levine or any of that team. But it just very much reminds me that what made Bioshock so great in video games is still what excites me looking at other games that are coming out in the future.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, this is kind of what I'm... Oh, there you go, I died, finally. This is kind of what I'm saying, is actually you get used to this as being something of a sci-fi cliche, really.
Yeah.
The idea of the exploration of the merging of mind and machine and what it means to be human and transhumanism, that sort of thing, is a very common reoccurring theme because, it's also something which is... we are facing.
Yes.
How much humanity can you strip away before you cease being human?
Yes.
And that is a moral question that we are, really about to answer with our technology in real life. So it stands to reason that it becomes part of a sci-fi narrative.
Yeah.
And Bioshock obviously goes down the path of, like... You could be a fucking nutcase and claim that anything it makes you happy. Do you know what I mean? Is it actually going to make you happy? Well, I'm not so sure about that. And what are the big social implications? Could you really have a utopia based on that? Well, I suppose if you're going with Bioshock's take on things, they're going to go, no.
Even a utopia will fall apart and crumble because of the people that it's made up of.
That's it. But one of the things is as well is the limited thing that you do have with your character is that you come into this world and then it kind of overtakes you as well at the same time. You don't escape unscathed because you take on these technologies as well.
Yes.
And inject yourself with them. So
which is again played up in the endings of the game as well.
Yeah,
which,
and they sort of just kind of like double down on that on 2, really, on the second one.
Yeah.
The third one, I'm not so sure because I haven't completed the third one.
Okay,
but
well,
the third one again is exploring very religious themes of...
Yeah, it's definitely a staple of the Bioshocks. I am one of those that really, really enjoyed Bioshock 2. I even dug the hell out of its multiplayer, and incorporating the plasmids and the weapons. The level up system was a little bit ropey, and sure, if you'd got all the best weapons and plasmids, you terrorized anybody that was just coming on there for the first time.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people saw it as a tacked on add-on, but I've enjoyed every Bioshock game. Bioshock Infinite is actually my least favorite of the 3.
Yeah.
However, I really enjoyed the relationship that the main character has with, I think it was called Elizabeth in that game, where you actually played a much more well-rounded character that was exploring himself.
Yeah.
Whereas the first 2 Bioshocks is very much more about the world impacting on you.
That's it. I mean, for me, I actually think I preferred the narrative in 3 so far.
Yes.
I preferred the narrative in 3 because of Elizabeth.
Yes.
And because you've got something a little more that you can connect to in the world.
It's very much like the little sister evolved into that sort of character.
Yeah, because in the first, in Bioshock 1 and 2, there's just no redeeming qualities. You're just like, I am, and there's no understanding either of why the character's even here. At least in the third one, you have a reason to go to the place where you're going because of Elizabeth.
Yeah, there is a motivation.
She is your
But
reason
the
for
first two
being there and continuing through the
Within
narrative.
the first two games, though, you do find your motivation. You do find, in the sympathetic voice of Atlas, that you want to help him and his family. You feel driven to. The game makes you feel like that's the right thing to do. So,
Well,
so it tries to evoke on you the player more than the character.
Yeah.
I find.
I mean,
So,
but the premise of why you even end up going there is because, it's a plane crash and you just so happen to have crashed next to a lighthouse.
Well, again, this all
which
is
takes you
explained.
down here.
It's all explained as to how this happened because,
There's no
spoilers, it's all
accidents.
orchestrated.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
meant to be this way.
Well,
Anyway, we are running out of time, Geoff. So, your final words about Bioshock?
It's one of those ones where it just really depends on your experience with first-person shooters and sci-fi. If you aren't experienced in that sort of thing, then I absolutely, totally recommend trying this out because it is a bit of a masterpiece of all things together, coming together to make a pretty good narrative.
Yeah.
But if you are very familiar with sci-fi and like many kind of like first person or typical kind of first person and role playing game narratives, there'll be a lot of things in here which you think, that's a bit cheesy, a bit of a cliche, I've seen that kind of before type thing. So it really just depends on your experience, I would say, and then how much you also really enjoy the steampunk thing. If you got a bit of a steampunk fetish, there's not really much out there for you.
No.
So yeah, I mean, some of it's going to be how much you personally enjoy this aesthetic, I think. And for me, I rate them as good. I wouldn't say they're the best game I've ever seen, but they are a very good example of just a lot of things that you've seen elsewhere brought together in a very sort of competent package. So yeah, I mean, I would recommend it. And if you can get it cheap, and especially get it on PC where the graphics are even looking nicer and sexier as well.
Well, it brings me into my recommendation. I can say that right now, only until, the Steam Summer Sale is on, this game is selling for like $3. Okay? There's actually a deal on where I think you can buy all 3 Bioshock games for under $20 right now.
Yeah.
Which is just a fantastic offer. So
that is pretty good.
I have to say that if you have played Bioshock and haven't played it since, go back and play it again. If you've never played Bioshock, get it today. Because it is one of the greatest games ever released. And I love talking about Bioshock. I love playing Bioshock. I love discussing the ideas in Bioshock. I think it has one of the greatest villains in video game history. It has a great soundtrack that just, like Fallout, just feels the atmosphere when you're listening to Somewhere Under the Sea. It's just the morality-based story, the immersive environments, the gung-ho gameplay, the plasmids, the characters, the Looney Tune sort of bosses and characters that you come across, the twists and turns in the narrative. This game is brilliant, absolutely fantastic, and I highly, highly recommend it. If I didn't make that clear enough.
Cool. Well, I mean, at that sort of price,
absolutely.
You'd be mad not to.
Well, that's it from us here on Off the Shelf Reviews this Gaming Friday. We'll be back next Friday with another video game. Of course, film reviews on Thursdays. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Patreon. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Take it easy.